Welcome back to Problematic Women. Today, we have so much to cover, so you're in for a good show. First off, this week, Kamala Harris announced that she is writing a book and releasing it this year called 107 to go over the 107 days of her failed presidential campaign. Can't wait for that one. And the other biggest news of the week, I would say, is Sydney Sweeney and Gavin Casalegno are making ads hot again. American Eagle, Dunkin, they are not backing down, and they are putting attractive people in advertisements again. It's marketing 101, and I'm so happy to see it. I'm also happy to see the liberal tears that are coming from that. And speaking of Gavin, we have to talk about The Summer I Turned Pretty and the latest episodes and what it has to say about marriage, faith, and getting married young. Really excited to have that conversation. But first, we have Jennie Lichter, the new president of March for Life, with us today. We get to talk about everything March for Life, the abortion debate. Roe v. Wade is over, but the fight for life is not. So I cannot wait to get into all of that today on Problematic Women. So welcome to Problematic Women. I'm Elise McHugh.
I'm Virginia Allen.
And I am Morgan McMichael.
And we are so pleased to have Jennie Lichter with us today, the president of March for Life. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this. I love your show. It's so much fun to be a part of it.
Well, you have been in that pro-life conservative movement space for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Your first March for Life was over 2 decades ago, right?
That's right. You're aging me, Virginia, but that is correct. You are right. Yeah.
I feel like we're about the same age.
Yes, that's right.
So 2001, were you in high school then, college?
I was a freshman in college. That's exactly right. Okay. So I had grown up in a pro-life family. My dad is a lawyer, had been a pro-life legal strategist. My mom is a mom of 8 kids. I'm the oldest of 8. And a longtime pro-life volunteer, but I had never come to the National March for Life, which was 600 miles away from where I grew up. And again, 8 kids, right? Not easy to trek us all across the country in January. So I came for the first time as a college freshman at Notre Dame, and I had what I think is the classic March for Life experience, where I came on an overnight bus with a bunch of other students. We slept on the floor at a gymnasium at a Catholic church in Arlington across the river. We had the absolute best time. And I had just an incredibly formative time, again, even as someone who had been pro-life really my whole life, but being at that March for Life in 2001, surrounded by tens of thousands of other pro-life people, especially other young people, because the march is full of high school and college students primarily, right? It was so powerful and just really drove home for me that, wow, this is a movement that's vibrant and it's joyful and it's full of young people like me, and I really want to be a part of this. And so that was the beginning of my March for Life story, that I, like so many people, have been kind of formed and inspired by the march. And since then, I've come just a bunch of times, especially because I've lived in Washington now for so long. Came with friends in my 20s or coworkers, you know, where you can kind of just hop out of your office building and up into the march, right? We've all done that, yeah. Then started bringing my husband when I met him, and then started coming with our kids. And this past year was the first time that I was backstage at the March for Life and got to have that different vantage point, which was just kind of blew me away.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think back in 2001, attending for the first time, one day, I'm going to head this organization?
No way. Of course not. No, of course not. But the amazing thing about it, again, I think, is that March for Life is sort of the catalyst for the entire pro-life movement. And for so many pro-life leaders, I did think to myself when I stood on the stage for the first time this past year, I wasn't leading the march yet at the time of this year's March for Life, but I was there and was sort of introduced to the marchers. As I looked over that crowd, and I think I even said it that day, you know, there is a future president of the March for Life here today. There's an 18-year-old girl in this crowd here who's going to become just an incredibly powerful pro-life leader for her season, right, in the history of the pro-life movement. And that I just find so moving now when I meet young people in the movement, just to think about what they're all going to be, what they're all going to become, even though right now it's not even, you know, a twinkle in their eye.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love thinking about that. Well, I want to get in a second to a little bit of just where the march is going, the future of the pro-life movement. But I want to take just a second to share a little bit more of your own story. You have a very impressive resume that is a little bit intimidating, if I'm honest. You went to Harvard Law School, and you have all of these amazing positions that you have held across Washington, D.C. in the conservative movement, including you worked in the first Trump administration. What was that like?
I did. Oh gosh, it was everything you think it was. I mean, it was such a privilege, right? Just such a privilege, first of all, to be working for a transformative president on behalf of the American people. It was challenging and fast-paced and really, really intense, right? I think like in any presidential administration, but especially in the Trump administration, there's this constant sense that you only have a certain amount of time, right? And I was helping to lead the Domestic Policy Council, so the domestic policy team in the White House. And we talked a lot with our team about how we don't want to get to the end of this administration and have any regrets, right? You don't want to feel like there was more you could have done and you just kind of didn't get around to it.
Yeah.
It really is the kind of work where there's a lot to do for this country and for the American people. And President Trump had then and has now a huge, ambitious, visionary agenda. And we had to work really hard to get it done. And it was incredible. I will say too, one of the really amazing things, one of the things that makes it such a privilege to work in the White House is I just felt you feel the history in that space, right? In the West Wing, but even more so, I think, in the executive office building on the property, which is a really old building, beautiful, historic. You've all probably been in it with gorgeous kind of wide hallways and tall ceilings. And walking around that building, I sometimes just thought to myself of all of the feet that had walked down those hallways before me, right? Yeah. All of the history that had been made and the policy decisions that had been sort of hashed out. And how now it was my turn, the turn of me and my colleagues to kind of own that building or inhabit it, at least on behalf of the American people. But when we were done, there'd be another set of people coming in after us, and those halls would just keep seeing more and more history being made. And that just really contextualizes, as we come up on America's 250th birthday, what an incredible run this country has already had and how much is still ahead of us. And just to be able to play a part of it for a limited period of time, especially, again, working for such a transformative president, was just an incredible honor.
Yeah. Oh, such an honor. Yeah. Well, we're always curious to hear, because you're a mom of 3, and that balance of that we're always, as women, trying to find of the family and career balance. How was that for you in the Trump admin, in even now as, president of a major organization?
Yeah, that's right. So my kids are 11, 9, and 3. So I had my first baby when I was working as a big law associate just down the road from here at a great law firm. And then once when I was working, my next baby was born when I was working for the Catholic Church. I was in a part-time role at that point in time. And then my third one was born right after I left the White House. So I've had babies in kind of all different professional contexts. For me, the way it has looked is my professional life has really ebbed and flowed, right? I think all of us, but especially for parents, I think just are really called to think of our professional life in terms of seasons, right? And to know that if you're making a decision to dial back or to step away or to ramp up, that's not going to last forever, right? It doesn't lock you in. It's a season in your life as you're mindful of your family's needs and your child's needs and your husband's needs, right? My husband is also a lawyer. Now he works as a consultant, but he's been practiced law for many years alongside me, and he needs to be able to be mindful of his own work and his own work commitments and his travel. So for me, the key has been a partner who's truly a partner, right? Of course, when Brian and I got married in our 20s, we had no idea what the future would hold for either of us, right? In terms of family life or our professional lives. But he now really sees part of his calling as making it possible for me to do the mission work that I do. And I am so grateful for that, right? And we work with each other for the good of our family. So in busy seasons for me, like the White House season or this one, he has looked for more flexibility in his own work so that our kids don't feel like they're being overlooked, right? Or kind of left behind or left out. And then there's been times when he has needed to really kind of be more dialed in on his work. And those are times when I have either dropped down to 80% or 4 days a week or looked for a work that's just kind of more regular. And that has worked really well for us. Here in Washington in particular, there's so many different sorts of jobs available, and it's been possible to do that. But the other thing I'll say, do you all remember, this was probably 10 years ago now, when the kind of catchphrase for professional women was, can women have it all, right? I think there were book groups, discussion groups, everyone was talking about, can women have it all? I was a younger mom at the time, and I just remember thinking then, like, this doesn't feel quite right to me, because that framework makes it seem like it's all about you, right? It was sort of about, how do I get enough mothering that I feel satisfied or that I don't feel guilty, right? How do I kind of reach my own professional goals? Like, having it all feels to me like it's about me, right? How do I fill my own cup? And I have just tried always to orient towards, what do my kids need from me as their only mom, right? I am, at times have been one of several lawyers or one of several policy staffers, but I'm not one of several mothers for the Lichter children. I'm the only one they have. And so that's the role for all of us in our family, as daughters, as friends, as sisters, as lives as moms, right? Where we're really and truly indispensable.
I mean, that's a huge testament of what like even the feminist movement continues to push on women is that
Absolutely.
your life is over when you have children and you have to make a choice where in your life you've been able to accomplish so much while being a mother and still making your children a priority. And I think that's something that a lot of what the abortion industry and feminists like to push on women is like, no, you need to work in a corporation until you are fully fulfilled. It's very like individualist mindset, like you were saying. And so what would you say is like your message to those people who feel like, you know, they can't do both things and like, life is an ebb and a flow, whether you're working a job and you're a mom and like where your just priorities lay. Like what would you say to those kind of people?
I am with you 100%. And it honestly makes me so mad on behalf of younger women when I hear that kind of messaging, which is sometimes really explicit, like you said, right? Sometimes from politicians, certain presidential campaigns even. This is part of the messaging, right? That unless you have easy access to abortion, if you get pregnant at the wrong time, your life is over, your professional life is over, you'll never be happy again, right? That your kids are your enemy, essentially. And it's just not true, right? It's messy, and sometimes I don't get enough sleep, and you know, some of you have, and you're faced with, right? But it's such a gift. I mean, motherhood gets a bad rep recently, like you said, but it is such a blast, honestly. It's so much fun, and it's so interesting to see the little people that your kids become. They're not actually just mini-me's, they're actually their own people, it turns out, and that's so fascinating. So I would just say, kind of to your point, really reject that messaging that it's kind of an either or, right? Or a zero-sum game, because as women, we are more fulfilled and will flourish all the more when we're pursuing our vocation, right? Our God-given calling in family life, if that's what we're being called to, right? And again, not that it's all like easy and roses, but your heart, like the Grinch, will just grow and grow and grow, right? There's so much room in our hearts and in our lives.
So being a lawyer was more fun than being a mom.
Oh my gosh. I actually like, being a lawyer also gets a bad rep. I actually happen to have loved practicing law, but in all of these, you know, it's funny trying to explain being a lawyer to your kids, you know, what did you do today? I wrote emails. And I talked on the phone, you know, they're like, interesting. Now they understand the March for Life, of course, and they think that's like way, way, way cooler, right?
Like mom's doing something fun now.
Yeah, they get that. Yes, exactly.
Have you taken them to the march before?
Yeah, so they grew up coming to the march, but this past year they got to come backstage and come out on the stage with me when I stepped out to meet everyone. And my, again, saint of a husband was trying to wrangle the 3-year-old and who's very feisty. And again, she's standing on a stage in the cold looking out at, 50,000 or whatever people with lights in her face. It's very cold. Yeah, so he told me afterwards, he said, you didn't know because you were just kind of talking to the microphone facing. He was like, I almost had to rush her off the stage. Like, it was very touch and go there for a few minutes. He was like, she was about to start either like yelling at me or saying like, no more or something. And that would have been so awkward. But that was really fun. And my 2 older kids have been coming on the road with me a little bit, actually, when I speak at state marches for life. And that is so cool for them to go on a trip with mom, right? And kind of share a hotel room. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's so fun. I feel like one of the best testaments to the pro-life movement that I've seen is when you see these very real moments of parents with their children, if they're not the picture perfect family, or even JD Vance and his kids just looking so bored at the inauguration, to even like the royals, Kate and William with their kids just like sticking their tongues out. Like, that is beautiful to me. It's like you have this huge important job, but you still have time for your family, and it's really great to see moments like that on stage.
There were so many kids at March for Life this year. That was my first march, actually. And I was filming content and I was like watching it all unfold, and like to see so many high school and college age men and women all flock to the National Mall to March for Life was honestly something I was not expecting to see, because I think when you talk about like the pro-life movement, a lot of people think it's more of an older movement. That, oh, Gen Z doesn't care about that. Most of Gen Z is super pro-abortion. How do you think we can target our messaging even better towards young people?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I do think one of the most amazing things about the march and the pro-life movement is its youthfulness, but you're right that that's not the image, right? So I think there's a couple ways to think about that. One is like the wonky sort of data-driven way, which is even just this summer, incredible numbers, I think, from Gallup that came out about how younger people, Gen Z, are identifying more and more as pro-life, right? Just since Dobbs, there's been, I think, a 20-point drop in the number of Gen Zers who want to see abortion legal in all circumstances, and something like an 11% jump in the number of Gen Zers who self-identify as pro-life. That's huge. It's huge, huge, huge. But how do we appeal to kind of even more? I think it's just letting people see the face of the pro-life movement, which is youthful and which is joyful and which is built on love and hope, right? And my sense, you all can tell me your sense as maybe represent closer in time to this generation, but I think young people are really looking for authenticity, right? And they're open to rejecting the progressive orthodoxy that's been jammed down their throats, right? And we're seeing that on a lot of other issues too, the kinds of things you all talk about here, about tech policy and trans and, boys and girls sports and all these sorts of things. But I think it's true of the pro-life movement too, where they're willing to kind of give it some thought. And you know what? We've been told that having kids is the worst thing in the world. We've been told that we need to have abortion available at any time of pregnancy, even though no one else in the world, almost literally nowhere else in the world is that the case, except like North Korea and one or two other places, right? We're not in good company there.
Yeah.
Right.
But let them see, kind of give them encouragement and let them be attracted by joy and hope and love and compassion, right? And the fact that the pro-life movement is supporting pregnant women. Planned Parenthood is not supporting pregnant women, right? And almost every pregnant woman who walks into a Planned Parenthood leaves without her baby. Something like 97%, right, of pregnant patients leave without their baby. The pro-life movement has sort of covered this country in pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes and faith-based groups that are helping pregnant women. So that's what we at the March for Life, and what I personally, as I've stepped into this role, are trying to really focus on, of just, look, the face of the pro-life movement is compassion. It's not shoutiness, right? It's not people trying to kind of catch pregnant women in a trap. It's really just about, look, like, life is beautiful. Life is really a gift, no matter the circumstances. And it feels hard sometimes, and sometimes people need a lot of support. But look, we're here actually with that support. And let people see that.
Would you say that, like, that is the message, that voice of joy and compassion, that representation, when we're looking at really where the pro-life movement stands right now and where the fight against abortion stands? Because, we have seen that there's still lots of abortions taking place in post-Roe v. Wade world in America. Now, Guttmacher, I think, reports 63% of abortions in 2023 were with chemical abortions, with the abortion pill. We've seen a huge uptick in that, even as, Planned Parenthoods are closing, and we celebrate that, but yet more and more people essentially are doing abortions via the mail.
Exactly.
So that kind of gets into that, like, okay, we can win on that legislative front. We can have these victories. And if we're not winning hearts and minds, we're never actually going to save every child. So I guess, is that the answer? Is that really continuing to lean into that joy and that compassion?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, right. There's kind of two ways, or there's the heart way and then the head way to change people's minds, I think, about a thing like abortion. So, of course, we have to keep telling the truth, and we will keep telling the truth about abortion, right? That it ends a human life, that it hurts women, leaves women with a lifetime regret, even if they're lucky enough to get away without any sort of physical ramifications, right? That women deserve better. We've been lied to by the culture. So all of those messages, we need to keep making the argument on behalf of life, right? But at the same time, I think you're exactly right? There's also a lot of work to be done kind of at the heart level, where sometimes statistics go in one ear and out the other, right? Because of the culture we've been marinating in, the culture of Roe versus Wade and abortion on demand for 50 years. So I think at the heart level, again, like, thanks be to God, joy and beauty are compelling, and the beauty of life is compelling. I think we see that even, I think it's so interesting, the turn in corporate advertising towards kind of tear-jerky commercials about the beauty of life, right? Or the passage of time. We can think about Super Bowl commercials. I think there was a Rocket Mortgage commercial that was just about, like, beautiful scenes of family life. People eat that stuff up. I mean, we all know in our hearts, right, that family life is beautiful and that babies are something to be celebrated. So I think helping people kind of recover that, is really super important, while we're simultaneously making the arguments, right? The kind of moral and legal and practical arguments against abortion too.
One of the biggest things that I see from the side of people who are, like, slowly turning to be a little bit more pro-life, but they still want abortion in the very early stages of the pregnancy. I see on Instagram people in the comment sections of Live Action, Lila Rose, all these different pro-life organizations. They're like, but if the baby is not even the size of the tip of a pencil, how can you say that that is a human? Now, obviously, for people of faith, we believe that every life is precious from conception to natural death. But how do you explain that to people who aren't Christians, aren't faith-based? How do you explain that life is still just as precious as you standing here today?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is harder, right? Because when you look at ultrasound pictures of a baby who's further along in a pregnancy, you can see, right? Okay, that looks like a human being to me. When the baby doesn't look recognizably like a human being, I think you're right. Then it's a little bit harder to get people to make that leap. So then I think what you try to do is just kind of go back to like, okay, well, is this another species? No, this is a human being again, right? And just like an acorn grows into an oak tree, this is the early stages of a human being. You and I and all of us looked like that at one point, right? And without any external intervention, turned into fully grown human beings, right? And so once we start thinking about kind of, okay, so as a human person, what does that little baby deserve, right? And in our country, thankfully, we're built on the foundation of a right to life, right? So you go back to that. But I think you're right that in that circumstance, it's a little bit harder to use kind of visuals and tugging on heartstrings of like, doesn't it look like a baby?
Yeah.
And you go a little bit more for the argumentation, right?
Yeah,
and I think you're right. Make it a secular argument, not a religious argument, but just a secular argument about, okay, we know when life begins. We know that at these early stages of pregnancy, people are already taking pregnancy tests and celebrating and telling their families because everyone knows that's a baby actually, right?
Yeah.
And so even if it doesn't look that way, we need to respect that little life too.
Get that lawyer argumentation in.
There you go. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of lack of education and like sexual education in schools. You know, a lot of that sex ed, those classes come from Planned Parenthood. And of course you view like a live birth scene. You're not necessarily told outwardly that life begins at conception. It's really like more of a question presented to millions of American children. And so I kind of want to know your take on this because I am a firm believer that a video of an abortion should be shown in a classroom just as much as the videos of a live birth are shown in classrooms so that men and women really understand the gravity of what a medical abortion looks like. Same thing with a chemical abortion, like discussing what that process would be like if you're going to learn how to put on a condom in a high school class and if you're going to learn about birth control and not actually be told the side effects of that. I think you should also be told about abortions. And I think that honestly is one way that the pro-life movement could excel more in this country. And I don't necessarily love the fact that it's more of like a fear-based system,
right?
But I do think it's necessary. That's my personal opinion. But I want to know from you, coming from March for Life and being a pro-life advocate for so many years of your life, you know, what are your thoughts on the education system and how can we cultivate a more pro-life society and culture from the ground up?
Yeah, that is such a great question. You know, I think you're right. And I have seen some polling even just recently that when people are introduced to what exactly an abortion is, right, they do change their minds, of course. In terms of schools, you probably all know there have been kind of across the country a growing number of states that have adopted what are kind of colloquially called baby Olivia bills, but that are basically prenatal education bills. And it is typically done alongside the health curriculum, right, where kids are looking at ultrasound photos and learning about fetal development and doing that piece of education, which shouldn't even be controversial, right? As you're, like you said, you're learning sex ed, you're kind of learning all about the human body, right? Like, okay, this is just a part of understanding what it means to be a human being. Where did we all come from? How does a baby grow in the womb, right? But that's not being done in a lot of places because, like you said, the curriculum is captured by the left in a lot of places, obviously. So those bills that are being passed by more and more state legislatures, I love. And at March for Life, we love and support and lift up that legislation. I think that's really good. And you can do that in age-appropriate ways, right? Because little younger kids, right, you maybe don't want to go in the direction of But I will say, I mean, even for young kids, and there's, you know, parents have to make judgment calls about how to introduce the concept of abortion to their own children. But with my kids, just in the last few years with my older two, as we've started, you know, we pray, of course, for pregnant moms and their babies all the time, and they know what my work is. And we've just at a very basic level talked about how, well, in America, moms are actually allowed to decide to kill their babies in their tummies. And that to a child is deeply shocking, right? Deeply shocking, because again, like, innocent kids, like when you just say it that way, which is what abortion is, it's very clear, I think, to people who haven't been captured yet by the culture, like that is not okay, right? That is not, why would that happen? And then can kind of work with their little hearts starting like that. So I think even to your point, like even just articulating what abortion is really plainly in the context of the school system would be really powerful.
Don't let the left define the terms yet.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah, or use euphemisms, right, for something that, again, when you state it plainly, I think everyone knows, like, oh, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Right?
Jennie, I want to get your thoughts on just kind of some current news that we're seeing around abortion right now. So we saw in Trump's big, beautiful bill that there was a provision to remove or stop funding to specifically Planned Parenthoods through Medicare, through Medicaid, excuse me, that Planned Parenthoods were receiving Medicaid funding. Trump said, okay, we're not doing this anymore. Now a federal judge has stepped in and blocked that. Give us just a little bit of insight into what is going on here in this fight over funding to Planned Parenthoods.
Yeah, absolutely. So props to President Trump for, as on so many things, right, helping to get over the finish line something that's been a goal of the pro-life movement for a long time, which is stopping taxpayer funding for the abortion industry. So this is something that is popular based on it's consistent with American public opinion. For many years, a majority of Americans have said they don't want their dollars going to fund abortions, right, fund the abortion industry. And it's, I would say, right on the merits, right? So it makes sense from a political perspective, from a public opinion perspective. And of course, Planned Parenthood is also a bad actor, right? When we're thinking about how to prioritize using American taxpayer dollars, this is an organization whose business model is built on ending human lives, misleading women into thinking their only answer is to get an abortion, and delivering substandard, quote unquote, health care, right, that they then charge to the government, right? And we know, and even the mainstream media has started to cover, they're actually bad at health care. Again, even setting aside the abortion part, like they're not good at doing health care. And their own annual report recently showed they're doing less and less of it, right? Much, much less in the way of pap smears and UTIs and well visits. Many more abortions than they ever have in the past. Okay, so Congress made a decision with the support of the president. All right, we're not going to be using taxpayer dollars to fund the abortion industry anymore. Planned Parenthood, of course, relies on an enormous amount of taxpayer funding, and so they went straight to court, and they deliberately, with their lawyers, went to a district where they got a judge who is, frankly, an activist judge. And I have to say, like, as a lawyer, I have a lot of respect for the judiciary, and I try not to jump right to using this kind of term. But as the Washington Post even said yesterday, there's nothing else to call it besides activist judging, right? This is a case where Congress is exercising one of its core powers, the spending power, right? It's one of its, it's one job, but it's one of its handful of really core duties, right? And this judge is saying, like, no, Congress wasn't allowed to make that choice, and we're going to keep this flow of taxpayer dollars going, even though our elected representatives have said they can't anymore. So I am very confident that as this case progresses through the judiciary, Planned Parenthood will ultimately lose. But it's really frustrating that in the meantime, right, they have successfully, again, gotten in front of a judge who is willing to just kind of step outside her authority and stop something that Congress, very validly did.
Wow, critical.
Could you guys imagine if Kamala Harris was president right now?
How different that was.
And how different Washington, D.C. and America would love to have pro-life. We definitely wouldn't be having this conversation. I know I'm very curious to know everyone's thoughts on Kamala Harris just released her new book, 107 Days. Titling 107 Days because that's from her start of her campaign to epic failure. And apparently she has recounts. It's like a journal kind of going through everything that she experienced. So we're going to roll that clip so we can all take a look at Kamala Harris's 107 Days.
All right.
Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. 107 days, traveling the country, fighting for our future. The shortest presidential campaign in modern history. It was intense, high stakes, and deeply personal for me and for so many of you. Since leaving office, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on those days, talking with my team, my family, my friends, and pulling my thoughts together. In essence, writing a journal that is this book, 107 Days. With candor and reflection, I've written a behind-the-scenes account of that journey. I believe there's value in sharing what I saw, what I learned, and what I know it will take to move forward. In writing this book, one truth kept coming back to me. Sometimes the fight takes a while, but I remain full of hope, and I remain clear-eyed. I will never stop fighting to make our country reflect the very best of its ideals, always on behalf of the people. So thank you for being in this fight with me. I am forever grateful, and I cannot wait for you to read this, and I'll see you out there. Take care.
So Kamala Harris launches her new book, 107 Days, and this comes one day after she announced that she will not be running for governor of California. So I am very interested to see what she has up her sleeves and what's coming next. But she talks a lot about, she recounts what happened during these 107 days, the shortest presidential campaign. And so I want to start off let's just go through and remember, what are some of Kamala Harris's quote unquote accomplishments and remembering what she did in this 107 days that led to her disastrous failing of not winning the presidency, thank goodness. I think one of my favorites is the fact that these 107 days only happened because the DNC decided to install her as a candidate. And so campaigning off of democracy, but never actually being democratically elected into this role, just being uplifted and then still failing.
No, it was quite funny because she just never addressed it either.
No.
The people, commentators on the right would always bring up, hey, this is very undemocratic. The campaign's silent. They just didn't say anything about it. They were like, thank you, Joe, for your service. Here is Joe 2.0. I think my favorite part of the Kamala 107 days was the whole brat thing. It was honestly the only thing to come out of the Democrats that had me shaking a little bit. I was like, did they capture the youth the way Republicans couldn't? And then they just did not handle it well. It was so cringy after a while. And, thank you, Charlie XCX, for saying Kamala's brat, because we have Trump now because of that in my head. So
You look like you just fell out of a coconut tree. Iconic.
The memes are so good.
I think, Jennie, to your point earlier on authenticity, I think that really is the main issue that so many young people are looking for. They maybe you're just starting to learn about politics and all that, but they can tell whether you're authentic from a mile away. And I think everyone can just tell Kamala Harris just has a hard time coming across as authentic. It's kind of, honestly, I feel like it's a thing of you have it or you don't. And she just struggles in the limelight to have that. And her people who were doing her media kept pushing her, I feel like, to try and be appealing to young and kind of be hip and cool and have these concerts, and it just felt unnatural.
Cringe.
Are you saying Kamala Harris doesn't actually listen to Megan Thee Stallion and twerks with her on stage?
I think that goes down as one of the most cringe moments of her campaign is them paying $5 million for a mediocre female rapper getting on stage dancing very provocatively, and maybe that's not gonna actually get you a lot more votes. Hollywood just does not have the weight that it used to when it comes to endorsements. And that's something her campaign relied on, was the Hollywood celebrities that really didn't work out for her.
Absolutely.
That's right. And to your point about authenticity, right? I mean, President Trump is authentic to his core, right? I mean, he is just himself. And I think we all knew what we were signing up for when we elected him, right? And I remember, I suppose in some ways the mainstream media was trying to fact check his authenticity, right? The McDonald's thing, of course, the famous thing, which I still laugh when I think about it. It was so good. I remember seeing a fact checker somewhere saying fact check, he doesn't actually work at McDonald's, right? Everyone thinks he's really slinging French fries, but actually it was a photo. It's and was that helpful? That's not helpful, because that's just a reminder that these oldsters kind of don't get it, right? He had such a good, and his team had such a good eye for just those great moments of connecting, I think, with younger people.
Yeah,
and
they did the trash truck.
The trash truck was so good as well. It was so good. And I have to say, of course, as we've been talking so much about abortion today, I'll be interested to see what she says in her book about the decision to make abortion the centerpiece of her campaign, right? That was her number one policy issue. And she and her team bet really big that the American people were going to pick her because they wanted abortion on demand. And that, there are a number of reasons she lost, but I have to think, again, because she leaned into that so hard, that was part of the calculus, right? They brought out their supposed closer, Michelle Obama, right, to give a speech about abortion rights right at the end. And didn't work.
Listen, even the Democrats were struggling economically in this country, so you can't rely on an issue like abortion when people can't buy groceries or gas. I think another one of my favorites was thinking just that trends and taglines were going to win for Gen Z, because it wasn't cool, it was cringe at the end of the day. And there was a moment, Elise, I agree, that part of me was oh my gosh, they're going viral on TikTok every single day. But at the end of the day, 100%, I think a lot of people were making these trends actually to make fun of Kamala Harris and just joining in because it was kitschy and not because it actually was translating into votes, which we saw that to be true.
Absolutely. Do we think she's going to run for president in 28?
I
guess so.
I think she really might. The fact that she is not running for governor and just the way that she spoke in the release of this book of, I'm still involved. I'm like, okay, if you're not running for governor, the only other office that I can possibly imagine her running for is president again.
She's kind of taken the Hillary Clinton route right now.
Or even the Joe Biden route.
The Joe Biden route. I'd be very curious because if she does run for 28, it's kind of looking on at least our side, JD Vance may be running for president, which I think would be kind of exciting.
I want to see them square up again.
JD versus Kamala. I mean, we all saw her debate disasters the first time around. I would be very curious to see what happens. I don't know.
I know. Well, it was so bad Taylor Swift had to endorse her immediately after. So if it's JD versus Kamala Harris again, like what's going to have to be the remedy? What's the Band-Aid for that? I'm really interested to see it.
Yeah, that's going to be wild. Yeah. Well, we are going to get to pop culture here in a second. But before we do, can you share with us, for anyone that would like to get more involved with the March for Life, how can they do that?
Great. So the National March for Life is in just under 6 months. It'll be here in Washington on January 23rd. I'm so excited already. It's going to be a great year. We have some really fun things and exciting folks kind of in the hopper. But we also march in state capitals across the country throughout the year. So I'll be on the road this fall with my kids in tow to some of them,
so sweet.
Marching in states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. So folks can just look at our website and look for a march near you in your state or in a nearby state. Those they're like microcosms of the National March. They're really fun. Again, tons of energy, tons of students, tons of young people. And then more broadly, in every community across this country, we all have opportunities to serve pregnant women, whether it's through our churches or women we know in our family networks or our communities, or pregnancy resource centers, which are always looking for volunteers and people to support their work. So one of the beautiful things I've been able to do as I travel for the March is visit a pregnancy resource center everywhere I have a speaking engagement, and just hearing about their work and seeing up close what they do has been incredibly moving.
Is there a reason why it's on January 23rd? Because it's always very freezing cold in DC.
It is, yes.
I'm just curious. It's
part of the charm. No, just kidding. Yeah, so when the March was founded, right, over 50 years ago now, it was founded in direct response to Roe versus Wade. Okay. And so in the early days, well, really for the 50 years it took to overturn Roe, the March was always on the Friday closest to the Roe anniversary, essentially.
I see. Okay,
and it's now, so much just a part of this historic event that it's, that's right.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard the joke in DC that it's just whatever the coldest day in January
is, it's always that.
It's a March.
100%. That's right. One thing I learned from my team this year was I learned about fleece-lined tights, which I highly recommend to everyone. They're huge for me. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's a new addition to my wardrobe, and I recommend to anyone coming to the March, just consider fleece-lined tights is what I'm going to say.
My favorite March for Life hack is putting the hot hand warmers in my boots.
That's also cute.
For the toes.
That's a good one.
That's my favorite one. It makes the whole day. I could walk 3 March for Lives on the day if I have those in my shoes.
Gotta have some warm feet.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Well, speaking of warm, hotness, hot people are in ads again.
Summer.
I weaved like Trump. I would say the thing that's really just taking over my Twitter, all of the news this week, because I don't know, Trump's been kind of on his best behavior this week, so I haven't really seen too much of him.
He was in Scotland.
He's really
giving,
he's giving Sydney Sweeney her time to shine, an American Eagle. So if you haven't seen this ad, and I don't know how you haven't, if you haven't, but I'm going to play the ad here. Sydney Sweeney, American Eagle. Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes. So obviously this was just a normal ad advertising jeans, marketing 101. You put a hot person in your product to sell it. And it did pretty well for American Eagle, but the left, of course, does not know how to joke. They don't know how to have fun. And they called this Nazi propaganda. What was your guys' initial reactions when you heard about this going viral for it being Nazi propaganda?
Well, first I was like, wait, are people actually upset about this? How can anyone actually be upset about this?
Yeah, I know.
But it is bizarre to see the reaction from some on the far radical left saying essentially if you're praising a white woman somehow that is racist and propaganda. Like I don't know how they can logic that, but they can.
I thought it was incredibly clever marketing, especially the billboard. I believe it was in New York where she walked up and crossed out jeans with a G and wrote jeans. Like it is very clever. And I think it got obviously the attention of the people, and conservatives I think are going to flock to American Eagle. They're about to sell out of jeans because of Sydney Sweeney. But But the notion that like, oh, an attractive American female being on an advertisement is Nazi propaganda, you're a fascist, you're racist if you support this, it's crazy, because if it was a celebrity like Zendaya saying Zendaya has great genes, no one would have a problem with it. If it was, you know, an Asian actor or a Hispanic woman, you know, nobody would have had a single issue with this advertisement. And it seems to be this reoccurring thing in society that I've seen, that anytime there's a Caucasian white woman on an advertisement, it is like Aryan, Nazi, fascist, white people can't exist in these spheres anymore. And I'm like, what happened? Like, okay, so now everything's racist if it's a white person doing it. It honestly just really frustrates me. But to your point, like, no, I think this is a clear indication, A, of where the culture is continuing to go, that we need to see more attractive people in advertisements. Like Calvin Klein used to have hot models.
We used to have Justin Bieber. We used to have it so good.
What happened? So, you know, I think we need to have more companies standing up against the left and just having attractive models. I know I am more inclined to purchase their clothing, and I don't think anyone on the left would really buy American Eagle anyways.
Yeah. Jennie, did you see this ad this week?
Well, my pop culture consumption is probably not quite at the level that you're going. So this is the way that this came on my radar, where I had seen the ad kind of going by at some point in my feed, and then just started seeing headlines that it was racist or Nazi propaganda. And honestly, initially didn't even understand. I thought, like, I must have been missing the ad they're talking about, because it can't just be Sydney Sweeney and her literal genes, right? Yeah. So yes, I mean, I'm with you. It's bonkers to think about. It is so clever. It's a pun. Like, do we not know what puns are anymore? I mean, it's almost handed to you. To me, it did remind me of like the old Calvin Klein ads, same as you said. Like, there's a long history of jeans ads being a little bit cheeky, right? Yeah. And they're doing a great job of just...
That's a pun too. It's a little cheeky.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
And she is not the only one. She is in good company with Dunkin Donuts. They have an ad this week of Gavin Casalegno from The Summer I Turned Pretty. He's very attractive, very unreachable attractive. And I'm just going to run that ad right here just to show you why people are also upset about this.
Look, I didn't ask to be the king of summer. It just kind of happened. This tan? Genetics. I just got my color analysis back. Guess what? Golden summer, literally. I can't help it. Every time I drink a Dunkin' Golden Hour refresher, it's like the sun just finds me. So if sipping these refreshers makes me the king of summer, guilty as charged. The Golden Hour refresher, only at Dunkin'.
And we're mad about that?
And we're mad about that.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad we get to
seemed fine.
He says the word genetics, and it must have just like set everybody off because he is white, he has blue eyes, but he doesn't honestly look like blonde hair, blue eyes. So I also don't get what the hubbub about this one is. Maybe people are just upset that there's attractive people again, because attractiveness equals right wing, which, hey, I'm glad about that.
We'll take that.
I'm glad that that's the connotation.
I posted on X this week. I said, why is it that liberal white women hate white people so much? And I said, why do liberal white women hate hot people so much? Because it seems to be the case that anytime there is an attractive person in an advertisement, speaking, you know, even working in the White House, you know, us conservative women have been slammed for all just being, oh, we're attractive and ditzy apparently, and we're fertile Republicans. Like, that's a good thing. I just think it's really interesting of what the left chooses to be upset about and really make headlines out of nothing.
I think the big winners here are American Eagle and Dunkin', because they've gotten so much free publicity over this.
True.
And I've been impressed at American Eagle. They didn't back down. They didn't apologize.
They did not apologize. They actually said to TMZ yesterday, this is yet another example of how social media is just not reflective of real life. The absurd response from some corners of the internet is absolutely not reflective of how American Eagle's customers feel. That is the first time I've seen a brand respond to controversy in a while and not apologize and even just be like, those are just crazy people on the internet. Like, this is not real life. Yeah, just chill out. So it's been really great to see that. And you know what? We're just putting hot people on TV again. That's so great to see, because it just makes it easier to watch. And speaking of Gavin Casalegno, he is in one of the biggest TV shows on TV right now, The Summer I Turned Pretty. And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it and you plan on it, but if you haven't, we'll just give a brief rundown.
Please do.
It's just about this one girl. Her name is Isabel, but she goes by Belly, and she is caught in a love triangle between two brothers.
Classic.
And we're on season 3. And in this season, she is engaged now to one of the brothers, but she had this intense crush and love on the other brother for like her whole life, basically. So it's basically about she's getting in this hasty engagement.
Describing this stresses me out, Elise.
Oh, and it's so fun.
Very awkward Thanksgivings ahead for this family.
Absolutely. And you know what? They show that on the show. But the recent developments, she got engaged and it's going to be like a 3-month long engagement. She just turned 21. They are very irresponsible. And the latest episode, everyone is mad at them for getting engaged and planning to be married young. I know that this is a big topic for conservatives about should we be getting married young? Because a lot of people say that. I think that's one of the things I think of when I think of Charlie Kirk. He always tells people, like, shock people with how young you get married and have kids, which I think it's a great message. But the show is pushing that, hey, maybe you shouldn't get married super young. And I just want to know you guys' takes on this plot line of two people clearly not ready to get married young, but everyone in the show is against them.
All right. So
let's warm it up.
So from inspiration from, this is my dad's advice, from my father, but I think it never hurts to date longer. And so the kind of formula of really long courtships and very short engagements, I think you can't go wrong. I think there's not necessarily a formula that I would say, okay, this is what you have to do for everyone, because everyone's different and everyone's story is unique. And so I think there are 21-year-olds that are 100% ready to get married. They're mature. Often they've come from families where they've watched their parents have really healthy marriages. They understand what that looks like. They're responsible. And then I have watched 21-year-olds get married and they crash and burn and they're divorced 3 years later. So it's not a blanket. I would say the biggest thing is, what are the people around you that you trust saying? And if you're a 21-year-old who's in love and you want to get married, okay, start talking to your parents, start talking to your pastor, start talking to mentors, start talking to people that you trust, and ask them, hey, is this a good idea? Or should we date for another 2 years and then jump in? Because at the end of the day, way better to be sure that you're sure that you're sure. And we've taken this a little too far in America, and now we're getting married so late that that's creating a lot of other issues. So I'm all for getting married young, but have a lot of voices speaking into you.
Which on that, her mom in the show despises their engagement and says, you know, I won't even go wedding dress shopping with you. I am not going to be at the wedding, where her dad said, you know what, this is going to happen whether we support it or not, and I will be at the wedding. And her parents are divorced in this situation. But for me, it's really disheartening to see how Hollywood does promote the idea. Like, this show is so big. Every young girl in America is watching The Summer I Turned Pretty and has been waiting for the release of this. And then to see, like, you know, a 21-year-old girl excited to get married to somebody who she loves, who also has been growing up with together. Like, their families are basically one big family. So, like, for me to see this mom, like, super unsupportive of a kid that she has known since he was a baby, I think that's the most disappointing part for me, is like, you know, I would expect her to be like, you know, maybe I do think you're a little young, but you two have known each other since you were 3 years old, 2 years old. You've grown up together. Like, who knows what's going to unfold in the show from now. But I do think, like, the overreaction of, like, we are not going to support this. You are too young to get married. You're going to regret it, was something I think that her mom said. I think that's, like, very disheartening for a female to hear from her mother, who is her self-proclaimed, like, best friend and confidant in everything in life. And, you know, no daughter ever wants to hear those words from a mom. So, like, do I think that there's some people who aren't ready to be married at 21? Yes, 100%. But in this show, there was just something that it really just, like, was a stab to my heart. I was like, hearing those words from a mom to a daughter is absolutely horrible. And, like, I think there's ways to communicate, like, hey, I don't really, like, support this.
Morgan, you have been cut off, just like we were during recording. We were editing this, and then, well, not we, shout out to our lovely editors, but we were editing this and realized that, oh my gosh, our audio cut out. So we're going to finish the episode for you here.
Yes.
And I just want to rebut what Morgan said real quick,
because she did this earlier. So we're running it back.
Yes, we're running it back. And you know what? I do understand. It's really upsetting. And it's an upsetting message when young girls are seeing a TV show and think, hey, maybe I shouldn't get married young, even if I am ready for it. But Belly and Jeremiah are not ready for it. They are so immature, and everyone in the show can see it except them. So I do think, you know, getting married young, it's a good thing if you're ready for it. And I do think a lot of conservative Christian people who do get engaged young are ready for that. But in the case of these two people, it's not the vibe. And I don't think we should push people to get married young if they're not ready to do that, just like they are.
Wait for the season. But we want to know what you all think. So our question of the week this week is going to be, how young is too young to get married? And also, how long should you be engaged? What do we think? Is 3 months engagement? Is that appropriate? Do you need to wait for a year? You got to let us know. So that's going to be question of the week this week. But I want to give a quick shout out to some folks who left some fantastic answers to question of the week last week. So
these were good.
These were so good. Guys, you're getting so spicy with these questions. I love it. So we ask you all if you would specifically request a female Uber driver if given the option. So Elena Richardson, she said, don't care. I wouldn't go out of my way. Fair. Ashley Page Burke, she writes, knowing it could still be a man, no, because as we talked about last week, it could be a male who identifies as female.
Yeah.
That would be even creepier. Healthy Wild Free said absolutely. So one gentleman answered, Scotsman 1588 wrote, my wife, if alone, yes. So I think that's interesting. Yeah. Saying yes for your wife. Macy Petty said absolutely not. Feel you, Macy. And then HRH Tech Law said, definitely no when going to the airport. Female drivers never help with bags loading in the car.
That is very real. I cannot carry my own bag. Even it's very damsel in distress of me. I'm not proud of it. But on the airplane, when I'm trying to put it in the overhead, I kind of have a little sad look on my face, is someone gonna help me? They do not help me usually.
Yeah.
So.
No, I'm always that person that I get usually right on the 50-pound mark. Sometimes 48, sometimes I go a little over, and then you have the awkward moment where they're like, you got to take some things out, man. And you're like, okay.
What am I supposed to do? Not pack that extra pair of jeans?
You never know what you're going to need.
12 pairs of underwear for a 2-day trip. You
just never know. Weather changes. Shoes are heavy.
Yeah.
Anyway, you need options.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thanks to all of you who responded. And again, sound off this week with our question of the week on the Problematic Women Instagram account. How young is too young to get married? We want your hot takes. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on brand new episodes of Problematic Women. And we want to know your feedback. So rate us, review us, all of the things wherever you listen. And we will see you right back here next week.